Welcome, everyone. This is very exciting, and I'm so pleased to have Mr. Delany and Mia Woolf here. I think we all are, many of us here anyway, are going to be very familiar with his work, Mr. Chip's work in not just in comic books, but in queer theory, science fiction, and of course all of his critical work, both on literary theory as well as on comic books. So thank you for coming. I'm just gonna start by just mentioning something that Bell Hooks said about bread and wine. Rather recently, I think about 6 months ago, she was giving a talk on transgressive sexuality, and I think she made this wonderful comment and really describing one of the reasons I think many of us love this work so much. She said, "The amazing thing about bread and wine is that it is so tender. And I think that we are still trying to figure out how we can create sexual images of the penis that are loving and tender and not about domination. We praise him because of the visions that he has provided in his work." And Hooks is praising a tenderness, I think, that's depicted both through the text but also through the art. And with that, I want to introduce Mia Woolf, whose work as a painter is really amazing, and I'm going to show a couple of images from this right now. If you want to say something about it too, that would be. So anyway, this is just some of Delany's comic book cast, right?
Yeah. Well, just a quick thing. Whenever it comes to the image in a comic book, that is the artist. And so a good deal of that tenderness is to be laid at Mia's door. And she did a wonderful job. And all I can say is that it certainly feels right to me as the person who wrote it. So then you can go on.
So these are some images from Mia's recent paintings. I just think it's just so amazing. Right?
Oh, is this thing on, or?
Yeah.
Actually, this is a painting out in Brooklyn of a lot I just moved to Brooklyn recently, and I went out walking around because I didn't know what to paint, because my head was all in that packing boxes, unpacking boxes kind of thing. And I found this empty lot where they had the thing on the left there with the circle. I think they had pulled up another cylinder. There was all these weird things and this weird graffiti, so that's where that came from, except I added my own graffiti. And the back in Chinese, it says Woolf in Brooklyn, so back on the right. But when you were talking about the images being the source of the tenderness, actually I think what it was because I was hanging around with you guys. Remember, I was always going over and hanging out with them and drawing them and trying to figure out how was this book going to look. And so I was like in the midst of your relationship in a way, and we're walking around and Dennis is showing us where he lived and how he lived with the shopping cart, and then we're hanging out in your apartment, and it's like, like the penises are just part of that kind of. You know what I mean? It's like there's no divide between the way you guys were together or the way you described your sexuality or the vibe of just hanging with you. So when you're immersed in something like that, it's not a question of like, well, let's make this tender or let's make this. It's just, I think it came from hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, and also when you're dealing with a story of two gay men who are living together and have been living together by that time when we first did this for 7 years, we are still together, and now it's more like 26. However, what can I say? There are going to be some penises around, at least two, and you're a very classical artist in many ways. Which is to say, you have an art school history, and one of the things that goes with an art school history is doing nude studies, wasn't that?
Oh, yeah. I did lots and lots of drawings of naked people.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things I think that just happened was, as you so wonderfully said one day, you came up, and Dennis was a little surprised. I wasn't. But you said, okay, take your clothes off. And so we did. Well,
there was a technical reason for that. It wasn't just penises. But
Yes.
One of the hardest things to draw is people dressing and undressing. Like somebody naked is one thing, or somebody clothed, but the process of in-betweenness is very hard to imagine anatomically. And I thought, I'm just going to blow it if I don't. So I came over with my camera, and I said, take your clothes off, but let me photograph the whole, you guys did a striptease for me. And then I got down on the ground, and I shot Dennis from below, so he loomed up, because it was like the Hollywood shot.
Is that, I think that's page 15, isn't it?
Do you have that one?
Do you have,
Oh, yeah,
can you get to page 15?
But that was really fun, because I want to, you want to have this sort of like, talk about, dominating. Penises, that's probably the only shot. And,
That
well, it's a little fuzzy,
Yeah. And so there, there are, can you get back to that page again, or is it, can you get back to the one before that?
There you go.
And yes, can you get back to 14? Is there, or do you have 14? We did. Huh?
This is working. Sorry.
I like it with a shoe, don't you think?
Yeah, very much
The
so.
monumental shoe and the monumental guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was so much fun to draw this, because I'd never really made a comic before. So Neil Gaiman told me, he said, I really like your book because I can see you inventing the comic book page by page. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or not, but now I kind of like the idea, because it is kind of what I did. And every time the tone of the story would switch, I would let the tone of the line switch, go from what you would call classical to like scribbly. Are we still stuck?
Do you have a 14?
Yeah, it's not appearing on the screen.
Oh, well.
Well, anyway. What it is, it's a picture. It's a picture of me taking my clothes off.
It's the underwear shot.
Yes, it's the underwear shot.
I love that shot.
Yeah, well,
Chip has got his foot, when you take your underpants off and you're like trying to balance on one foot and like you're kind of stuck in them and they're sort of stretching. I love that picture.
Yeah, I'm rather fond of it too.
You're very cute.
Well, thank you.
It's the cute penis shot.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But there are lots of.
That's not it.
No, that's it. That's
the one before.
It's the one. Is it the one before? Yeah.
the one
No, it's the one after, I think.
I don't know. It's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
You'll have to buy the book.
Yeah. Clearly, there's no other way to do it. But anyway, that's a lot. That's one of the things that is, is entailed in writing a story like this, and when you and also drawing a story like this, and I think the thing you have to do, is just approach it very straightforwardly as it's something that's there, so you produce an image of it. I think if you do it without too much editorializing, it'll work a lot better than if you have a point to prove, and you just at least that's the way it seemed to me.
I never thought of it about it. I just thought about it as this sort of fluid story, and I was just following along, picking things out of the air, or listening to you, or looking at you guys.
You notice she says exactly the same things I do, only she says them in her own, Mia says them in her own words, and I think actually they are probably much more apropos to the way an artist thinks about it. I think maybe the writer thinks about it in one way, and
but when you were but you took it from letters, right? But
yes.
when you were thinking, you weren't thinking analytically, were you? Weren't you just chasing the story, or were you not?
Well, I was chasing. I was trying to recall what happened. And that was the enterprise. And these originally came from a set of letters, I think about 3 long narrative letters that I had written to friends at the time about meeting Dennis and getting together with him. Dennis had been homeless for 6 years when we met on the street. He was selling books from a blanket on 72nd Street. And we started talking,
It's in there somewhere.
It's in there somewhere.
Buy the book.
Yeah, if you can get it, that's sort of the first 2 or 3 pages of the story. I'm making Anne's life absolutely miserable here.
17.
Huh?
17, I think I saw that.
No, the one he's talking about is in the very beginning when he
It's
meets
in
Chip.
the very first 2, 3, page 1, page 2, page 3. Everybody just likes that 13 and 14, yes. At any rate, so there, that's you're all sort of scattered all over the auditorium. This is the kind of place where the last 16 years of teaching university courses makes me want to say, would everybody come down and get closer to the front or something? Those of you who feel like it would probably work a little better if you want to make the move. Plus, I think it would be easier to have a conversation if we were all just a little closer. So you might want to do that. That might be a little. Thank you very much. That's very nice of you to come on down.
We can see you.
And also, if you have any, I don't know, I'd be just curious, how many people of you have actually seen the book before, or is this your first exposure to it? So about a third of you have seen the book before, and then how many people of you have not seen the book before? Okay, yeah. Well, the book is an attempt, was originally published in 97, I think, back in 97, to tell the story of how I met my partner, now of 26 years. At that point, we'd been together for 7. We got together in 90. It was a little unusual to put that kind of story. There were a lot of autobiographical comics, but there were not very many autobiographical gay comics. What can I say? And so we did it, and the idea was just to do it the way you would tell anyone's life story. It was interesting. I found the reviews were kind of interesting. People tended to like them, but you got really bizarre things like, but if one day Dennis goes wild and kills Mr. Delany in his bed because he was a homeless person and absolutely psychotic, I won't be surprised. This is actually a reviewer.
But that's so weird because in the book, Dennis is worried about you being the crazy person.
Well, that's the point I was. That, of course, is the point I was going to make. That was the next point, and in fact, Alan Moore brings that up in his introduction. He sort of says, and he says, if you look at it historically, if you look at the Dahmers and the Nielsen's, etc., whose worries seem more grounded? The homeless person who is being taken in by the middle-class professor. Or the book reviewer who is afraid for the middle-class professor that somehow he has taken in a wild psychotic maniac. The other thing, of course, which is in the same review, this gentleman, and this is a good review, by the way. This is not a bad, this is a review by somebody who basically likes it. But he also says, well, the other thing is, what do they talk about? What does a homeless person have to talk about with a comparative literature professor? And Dennis gave the best answer to that I've ever heard. We were laughing over the review, and he said, if you ever run into that guy, tell him we sing show tunes together. which I always thought was just a hoot.
I think this kind of book, especially back then, you're getting more about them than an actual clean slate review.
Of course, yes.
There's an awful lot of coloration of like I never forgot when I showed it to my now ex-father-in-law, very straight Italian Catholic guy, and I didn't warn him. Usually after that I'd say, and there's blowjobs in it, but before that I didn't say anything. So I handed it to him, and he's paging through, and all of a sudden he just goes like this. His whole body just froze. Now, I have to give him credit. He didn't say anything, and I think that colors even the reviewers. They don't know how to deal with that jerk that they have. You know, so they say all these other, they work their way around it. They're like, rather than just saying, oh, sex, hey, cool. You know, they're disassociated and they're up against themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, this is what, in terms of the response at the time, I think that's...
Yeah. Maybe
that's
now people are like, hey, blowjobs. I don't know.
There's still people who are a little surprised at that sort of thing. Are there any things that anybody would like to ask from the audience? A gentleman in the middle there.
I mean, you're talking about this kind of the responses from reviewers or from whomever, but you must have, as the creators of the work, must have been cognizant that could happen, that would happen, right? So did you guys think about that, or think that or was it
Actually,
a thing of self-expression that you really didn't think about it?
I went to Chip and asked him specifically if we were going to put graphic sex in it, and I said, I think we should, because that's how you write and talk about your life. You're very forthcoming, so I think the art should reflect that. But I never really thought that, I don't know, doesn't everybody know about blowjobs? I don't know, like a secret or something. I don't know, I don't know about you, but when I'm making art, I'm so into the process that the other part, I just didn't think about it that hard. Did you? Were you cogitating over that?
No, I wasn't.
No, you wouldn't either,
no. I wasn't.
Maybe we were naive, I don't know.
Yeah, I think to do this kind of thing, you have to be a kind of divine idiot, you know, which is the term. That's not my term. I don't know whether you really are, how divine you are. Nevertheless, I think you have to sort of just go ahead and keep your eyes on the good and the pure and look neither to the left or right and do what you have to do. And then if somebody else says something, you know, you say, oh, well, no, you sit down and you say, yeah, well, talk to me about it. You know, what do you think? You know, it's like you're a therapist or something.
Actually, one of the weirdest responses I got, this is when I lived upstate, and this is before everybody had a scanner, and I was going and making Xeroxes, and the copy shop I went to, I knew them, and I was always there, and I always had piles of stuff on the counter. And this woman came up to me, and I think she told me that she was a lesbian, but I don't remember, but it was clear that that was her point of view. And I said, oh, it's a gay love story. And I handed it to her, and I didn't warn her, you know. And it was sort of the same thing. And then she said, well, you did say it was a gay, and I didn't realize at that time that the terminology gay and lesbian didn't always I just wasn't thinking about that kind of stuff. I just thought it was like this, you would get that it wasn't female and male. There was this other thing going, but she was almost as bad as my father-in-law. So you never know what button you're going to hit.
Yes.
You know? I think she expected vulvas, not penises. Mm-hmm. And I disappointed her. But.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions that anyone? Yes, down in the front there.
How did this collaboration come about?
Well, a long time ago, Chip published Dahlgren. And I was a huge fan, but I'd never met him. And I went to the science fiction bookshop and sat at his feet because there was only one chair and he was in it. So I was on the floor sitting next to my friend Robert Morales, who I didn't know at the time. And I started drawing Chip because that's how I didn't know how to talk to people that I totally admired and was smitten with. So I would draw them. That was my interface. And Robert, who was a writer, offered to buy the drawing from me. So the three of us at that point became...
I didn't know either. Well, I didn't know either one of them.
None of us knew any of us.
Yes, I didn't know either one of them. Robert became one of my closest friends. But
we bonded over this particular thing.
Drawing,
and
yeah.
Then, well, yes, and then later we saw each other more and more. But then, this is my end of the story. I at one point moved upstate for a while, and I was used to New York, and I had a very young child, and I was very isolated, and I was kind of going cuckoo. In retrospect, very cuckoo, but I didn't know it at the time. So I was like making Xerox, what are now called art books or zines or I don't know, and sending them to people and desperately trying to connect with people because I was alone a lot of the time with a very small child. And I think I remember asking you, hey, you want to do a book together? And I don't know if you remember it that way, but that was where I was coming from. I was like desperate to do something with somebody. Yeah. And of course, I'm imagining this like tripped out science fiction story, right? And all of a sudden there came, you know, these letters, and what are they full of? They're full of scenes in the city. And I usually painted more organic things. So I had this huge challenge. I had to paint, well, draw page after page of cityscapes and people within them and streets and cars and buildings and shopping carts and guys undressing and chandeliers and weird hotels. And actually it turned out to be great, the challenge of it. But that's how it started. It was a very casual kind of, oh, well, why don't we just do this? There was no thought of publishing or money or anything like that at the time. It was just like, oh, well, let's, yes?
Yeah,
Just
that's,
do a book.
Yeah, that's basic. From my point of view, now, first of all, this was my second graphic novel, or graphic novella, as the case may be, not my first. You had can you find that? I did a wild science fiction graphic novella first called Empire. And it was fun in some ways, and it was indeed even exciting. It was done with an artist named Howie Chenkin. Are any of you familiar with his work? Oh, okay, I see some people nodding. And Howie was great to work with in many ways, but there's one moment in Empire that I always cringe over. And one of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to have a story that the main character with agency was a woman. She was an adventurer and a heroine, and went around doing all sorts of bizarre things, and doing them very, very well. And at one point, there is a sort of fight in a desert, and how we did everything through the book exactly the way I wanted on the first, at least on the first pass. And we got to this one scene where basically Howie thought, well, it needs to be just a little bit more exciting. So I have to, so I'm going to put in just a little story wrinkle. And one of the things I had thought through a lot was that I didn't want to use any things that I recognized as sexist tropes, conventional sexist tropes. And we almost, the sidekick was a young woman instead of a young man. There is sex. Both of the two women have sex, not with each other, but, and they have there are different responses to them. They have different responses to them. At any rate, there is this thing where the baddies and the women goodies, are fighting. And somebody, decides that they're throwing, she's about to shoot the bad guy, and in my thing, she just shoots him. But Howie thought, oh, well, it's not exciting enough, so suddenly something comes out of the blue and knocks the gun out of her hand. Now, I don't know, maybe you are not old enough to remember when there was not a single fight in a movie where there was a woman, where the woman didn't drop the gun at the absolutely important time, or some
trip and fall.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, right, exactly. Or, and I thought, oh, Howie, come on, of all the things you could do. This is just, why did you have to do this one here? Suddenly we are in the middle of, so many fights in so many action movies where, where the woman finally picks up the gun and does it, and the dog runs in and knocks it out of her hand. It doesn't matter what it is, but somehow the woman is never allowed to shoot the gun. And I thought, this is nuts. And this is your idea of more action? Well, anyway, also later on, in the same story, the packager, who was a guy named Byron Price, who is no longer with us, but Byron decided it was all fine except the climax, which he totally rewrote. And he had, and cut the art up so that it couldn't be put back together properly. We'd been really very careful about keeping the number of words down, and Byron was, you're a writer because you're going to use all these extra words. 35 words a panel, you know. I know the limit. You know, Byron's panels have like 175 words a panel. And suddenly that you can't see for the language that he adds to this thing, where it doesn't make any sense and people are running around, you know. And so anyway, so I was kind of unhappy with the overall response. Howie's paintings are sumptuous and lovely and voluptuous, and I really like them. But the whole thing didn't work because, one, the resolution of the story was not mine. And two, at the one climactic point, suddenly it turns into, an early James Bond film, as far as it's dealing with any sort of active women characters. So I thought, oh well, I didn't win this one. So I didn't do another one from between 82 and 97. And then when I did it, and I thought, well, this time I think I would like to do it with a woman artist who might have a little bit more sensitivity to some of these problems, which you did, I don't think there is an overtly sexist moment in this story of two guys fucking a lot. Which is not entirely what it is, but two guys geeing themselves up to do this. And it was, and it was fun to do. And I feel much more satisfied with the second one than with the first one, because of all the things that the times and the culture just wouldn't let happen. So that's from.
Well, nobody was telling us what to do either.
Yeah,
it was just
exactly.
You and me running around doing it.
Right. Whereas in the first one, there were a lot of people telling both Howie and me what to do from beginning to end, and so everything from. I could go on. I've written a whole article about it. That's in a collection of mine called Silent Interviews. If you're interested in the disaster that was Empire. So that's my, and this was more fun. The other thing was a lot more fun. I think it's, and it is, yeah, and it's tender. Tender is good.
It's also meandering,
yeah,
which is nice, because most relationships, they're not like movies. They are meandering.
Yeah.
They go this way, they go that way. You forget to pay for the book, so you have to come back. This is part of the story of how they kept meeting. And
yeah,
there's all these sort of. It's not directed. And I like that it meanders. So I got to follow that with the art.
Yeah. Yes, sure.
About the meandering, when you guys first started to work on this project, did you make a decision together, like, okay, the story will start from like you and your partner first met and go to the present, or did that sort of shift as you were collaborating, working together on how the storyline would go?
Well, it pretty much followed that in the original story draft. As I said, I think there were 3 letters that covered pretty much most of the material in the book. And then once we got started, I think you came back with a sort of sketch.
Well, the thing is, you never wrote it. You never wrote a script.
Yes, I did.
Did you write a script?
I wrote
I started working straight from the letters.
Yeah. Well, you see, now maybe you didn't work from the script.
Maybe not. That would be like me.
Yeah, which would be fine. Which was fine because I was, I thought this was sort of like. We were
You didn't describe panels, did you? Except in
No. We did it Marvel style.
What's Marvel style?
Marvel style is what you were working in, my dear. No, which is to say, Marvel style, there are two kinds. There's DC's, what DC used to do is the writer used to write it by panel, panel. Marvel style, the writer would do a plot synopsis and let the writer break it down into panels.
That's why I didn't think of it as a script.
Yes, and then the writer would come back and put the dialogue in that order, and so that's basically how we did it,
Wasn't the dialogue already in, or no? Did that come after?
Well, I
think it was all of a part.
Well, a lot of the dialogue was written after I saw, the pencil, I saw the roughs. Yeah, and then we put the dialogue in, mostly from the letters. I was remembered from the letters written at the time.
Well, if you've ever read an Alan Moore script,
yeah,
that's what I think of as a script. Like there's these detailed descriptions per panel, how many panels exactly. There's a little bit of saliva.
That's DC style. Yeah,
And this was much more loosey-goosey, and I would invent how to lay out the page. A couple times you suggested things, but mostly I was just like, and then the bicycle thing I think was my idea.
Right, yes.
That actually wasn't in the letter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Flying bicycle. There's a flying bicycle. I could bring it up now.
Yeah, okay, we got the flying bicycle. There we go.
Because Dennis is talking about all the new experience he's having. And there's a food page too.
Yeah, can you go back one page?
Yeah, he's talking about all the different kinds of food he never ate, which was fun.
Yeah, he'd never eaten mushrooms, he'd never eaten strawberries, he'd never had Chinese food before, he never had blueberry pancakes, he did not know that there were two kinds of syrup, maple syrup, 100% maple syrup, and regular old ordinary Aunt Jemima.
So that's very formal, that kind of page. But then...
And then finally I said, go back. And where are we? And finally I asked, well, with all this strange stuff, is it better than being on the street, free to go wherever you want, anytime, and not be responsible to anyone? He looked at me sideways. Is this better than being on the street? Nigger, are you crazy? He said to me.
He also got a bicycle, which he hadn't had before. So.
Yeah, and to which I can only say, I think that's the perfect response. I think that was the perfect response. And so we laughed, 6 going on 7 years. We're still getting along real well, and the story goes on.
But that allowed me to do, he didn't write in the flying bicycle.
No, the bicycle actually flying is Mia's addition.
And the Beaumartsa thing in the Central Park.
Yes, and there are several places where Mia added other things. There's a walk through Central Park where there are mysterious shapes in the underbrush.
They stole from Italy. There's a famous park in Italy called Beaumartsa where there's these monstrous sculptures that are integrated into the foliage and the shrubbery, and
suddenly that became Central Park.
Well, I just thought, living in Central Park, going through at night and having to, do everything there and finagle people, getting out of the way of people, not so good people. So I thought monsters in the underbrush was sort of good.
It was absolutely, it was in terms of giving the feel of what's going on. I think I think it works absolutely perfectly. I don't think anyone mistakes it for something that's actually there.
Well, if you've been to Beaumartsa.
And there's also an opera about Beaumartsa. Yes, that's why I was so delighted when you wanted to put it in, because there's a wonderful opera called Beaumartsa about the guy who put together this amazing sculpture, these amazing sculptures down in in South America?
Italy.
Yeah, okay.
So look at our brains were and we didn't even know it.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. How are we doing? Time, what's it?
It is 5, so we've got plenty of time.
Oh, we've got plenty of time. Okay.
What else do you guys want to know?
Yeah. Okay, yes.
First of all, I absolutely love this graphic novel, and I think we should go and buy it. I just have kind of a practical question that's related to something that was mentioned earlier. I love it, but I was always struck by how short it is considering, Through the Valley of the Nested Spiders, or, The Motion of Blood on Water, where you have these 800-page poems almost, and I'm just wondering how you sort of selected what to put in here, and why is it longer?
3 letters. 3 letters, and each one has about 5 to 7 pages about the story. One of them has essentially the beginning of the story, one of them has kind of the middle, and one of them has the most recent, then there is a kind of, once we get to the flying bicycle, then there's a skip of a couple of years. And then there's another couple of little incidents that round things off. When I got accidentally hit by a truck one day and broke a rib. And we built around the text that we had for the story. We had the story, but, and it seemed to make a coherent story. Though if you cut out those 5, the 5 pages from one, the 7 pages from the other, the 4 pages from the other, and put them together, they seem to make a coherent story. I think, and you seem to feel that they did too.
Yeah, well, the art always takes a lot longer than writing one page, so it seems longer to me probably than to, but when you read a comic, it always, goes like that. But each page has been labored over, so there's a depth, but it's that way rather than this way. I don't know, I never thought about it. I just thought that was about right. Yeah. You get kind of the whole gist of the story.
You bring up Through the Valley of the Nested Spiders, which is my most recent science fiction novel. Are you Yetta, Howard? Oh, I am so glad to meet you. I am so glad to meet you. Wow, we've been corresponding on emails, but we've never seen each other face to face before. At any rate, but there's a kind of fun story that has to do with gay comics in general. First of all, I read gay comics. I like them. I think there's some very interesting comic books in this genre. And one of the things that happens in Through the Valley of the Nested Spiders is simply the main characters read gay comics too. They live in this little town in Georgia, and it's one of their ways they are attached to the larger world. They read class comics, and at one point they are reading Brother to Dragons, and they have read issue 1 and issue 2, and they are waiting for issue 3. I'm so glad you left, because I thought this was going to be my best joke. At any rate, and finally, sometime, this is a science fiction novel, so sometime around 2018 or 2019, the 3rd issue finally comes out, and they're very happy, and they all sit around and read the 3rd issue. But that's how you know the book is science fiction, because it hasn't happened yet, and we're still waiting for it, all of us. But gay comics have always been very important to me, or at least since they've been around, and so I'm very happy to have contributed my little marginal attempt at doing something like that in the genre. Yeah. Yes.
I'm with the New York Crime Times, maturity environment.
Okay.
So this question goes for something to do with maturity. It's an odd topic for a young audience. Mainstream gay comics are probably for younger people in general. And you're a perfect age for me, but I'm wondering how is this received in a general, wider context?
I have no idea. Nobody has ever mentioned the way I deal with, the class comics, that my characters are always sitting on the porch in Georgia, folding back and reading along. And I'm sorry, no, I'm reading my comic book now. Can you just come back and bother me later? I want to finish my story, which is the way you read comic books, or look at comic books. And so I again, I deal with them the way, the way I would in an ideal world, like I would like to see them integrated into the world.
But I mean, I've read comic books since I was a little kid. I mean, I know that's weird for a female, but now I'm an older kid. And I'm still reading comic books, and I have a huge collection. And there must be a lot of other people like me.
Of course,
and they probably still are interested in sex and comics, I mean, or whatever. I mean, I'm sure the audience is there, right? Maybe it's just not as obvious. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I'm just curious what sort of distribution happened around it at first, and then if you're getting another wave of that. Because I mean, it's the kind of thing I would tell everybody I'm going to read, because there's a lot of people I never read.
Well, the first one wasn't Fantagraphics; it was
Juno Books.
Juno Books, and I don't know if you guys know what Juno, but they did a lot of very fringe publications, seriously fringe. Bread and Wine was nothing compared to some of their other things. Very fringe, sexual things, fringe, other things, I mean, all sorts of crazy stuff. And I don't think a lot of people saw it. I mean,
well, I don't know.
Some people saw it.
People saw it. I mean, people never stop. I can't remember a year going by where someone didn't bring it up with me. And it's been oh yeah, I really like that comic book you did. The other thing, of course, well, again, this is very different from let's say the average class comic, which is essentially a sexual object. I mean, it's an object that from beginning to end, every other page, there's a sexual encounter. There's one, I think, in Bread and Wine. There's
one long one.
Which is that is to say, it goes on for 3 pages.
Right.
And four with the build up when you get the people taking their actual clothes off. But in 44 pages, that's 4 pages out of, if you turn that into class comics, they would say, well, that's very nice, but don't you think you could add some sex to it? And which I could perfectly understand. It's a matter of the genre. The genre is pornography. And I don't think there is anything wrong with the genre of pornography. I'm a great believer. I am not a lover of softcore porn. I really don't like softcore porn. Which is one of the reasons why when, I thought, if we're going to have sex, in the story, let's make it do, there we go, yes,
and there's a story about that.
Yes, you want to tell the story.
Well, it's, from the artist's point of view, I mean, when he came to that, I'm thinking, all right, I know all about blowjobs from the act of it, but I was never photographing myself doing it, and I'm not much of a voyeur, so I'm thinking, and I have a lot of reference books, but I don't have a lot of pornography, so I was looking through my, few books that had sex pictures in them. And I'm like, this is no good. There's no really good, and I had a very specific image in mind, which is with the sort of this grandiose profile, to make it big, not physically, but the feeling of sex, since the feeling is so big, I wanted it really to be emblematic. So I ended up with a mirror, and I had to be the model, so I like this in the mirror. Because what happens with your jaw? I mean, with the face, and it's the same when you have to draw people kissing. It's very complicated because everybody's all twisted, and then you've got 2 beards going on, and everything is all mushed together. And this is a very interesting problem. I went from streets and cars and straight lines to what does the jaw do when it opens that wide? The penis isn't an issue, but the jaw and the and then the kissing, that was, and then of course I did the cum shot, which isn't realistic as Chip will explain, but I wanted the white and the dark to look like that, so it would be all slippery and erotic, you know? So it would visually impart the feeling.
Yeah.
If it's all inside, you don't get the fizzy quite the same.
Yeah, well, I am very fond. I'm very fond of that picture. I think I think it does all sorts
You
of.
did complain, though.
No, I didn't complain. Dennis complained.
Did he?
Yes. In the back. Yes. In the back, there's an appendix where where me, Dennis, my daughter, John Delgazo, who is a friend, all the people who are characters in the comic, we all sat there and we talked about what was inaccurate in the comic. And Dennis's comments to me are, Dennis's comments, not to all of us. We were sitting in a group. You were there too. And, Dennis's comments are the ones that just, they're from someone who was homeless for 6 years and lived on the street. The first thing he said, well, on the page 2, he said, do you have page 2? I do. Yeah. Okay, because it's worth looking at it just to see how different people see. You're going in the wrong way. Yeah, that's. Yeah. Right. Well, no. Okay. We're close. Okay. Well, yeah.
There we go. Whoa.
Yeah.
That one.
That one. Yeah. So he's looking at that. This would never have occurred to me in a million years.
Didn't occur to me either.
And obviously it didn't occur to me. And so Dennis, the first thing he says, well, on 72nd Street, you've got the traffic going in the wrong direction.
I do.
Yeah, he said the traffic runs in the other direction. I would never have noticed that. And then his next comment, he said, in my cart, in my grocery cart, that he lived with on the street, he wheeled that back. He says, you've got everything thrown into it, all messy. He said, if I put my stuff in there, I'd never been able to find anything. You have to pack everything, really carefully. And then he said, but you probably wouldn't have known that unless you'd been on the street too. Well, that was really interesting. And then he went on to the next one. Now, then I think I chimed in. One of the things, now Dennis is a very, he's got a meticulous side to him that is totally different from mine. In Freudian terms, he is anal and I am oral. That's the way it goes. What can I say? And it carries through his personality and my personality. At any rate, I was saying when there's a picture of us, if you go on another couple of pages, in the motel room together at the end. Wait.
No, it's keep going.
Keep
It's
going.
after the sex.
It's after the sex, and it was after his story about things. Wait.
No, it's still.
One more. No, back.
It's when you go back and he's packing up, I think.
Right. One.
No, keep going. I think it's farther along.
No.
You go back to the.
Can you go? Yeah, it's in the motel room.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, there it is. Okay.
He's packing up everything.
Now, one of the things, and this was one of the things, when Dennis decided to in the motel, and nobody's put their clothes on yet, and he is he's repacking his knapsack that has replaced the trolley cart, the cart. The trolley is the English term for it, and Alan Moore refers to it as a trolley in his introduction, which is kind of interesting. At any rate, when Dennis is putting everything out on the floor, it was like there was a piece of graph paper, and every little item, every little pack of batteries for his radio, every little tape cassette for that he played on his radio, was like on a space on a piece of graph paper all across the floor. It was the most meticulous thing I'd ever seen. I mean, I'd never seen anybody organize that much junk so carefully. And it was really, you know, and as I said, that the only thing I could think of that was kind of off about it was the fact that this is the one place where it would have had to have been on a graph piece of in order to get the sense, you know, of that meticulous thing that Dennis had done. Anyway, the other thing that he said, and also, and then then his last comment, he says, and also he said in the scene of the blowjob, he said, you have not ever wasted that much in your life. That was his word. And he said, you remember, he went on to say, you remember I had that t-shirt, it said, mean people suck and nice people swallow? Well, you're one of the nice people. Well, this was his comment, you know, and to which, what can I say? He's right. But
artistic license.
Yeah, and then he went on, he said, but I guess that was poetic license.
Yes.
Yes, and which Mia said, yeah, that was kind of, what did you say, for art and for sloppy love, which I think is very sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so any other questions? Yes.
I have a question about the overlap between the subject matter and similar themes that you dealt with in this graphic novel and in your novel a few years prior, The Madman.
Yes.
And I was wondering, just you in terms of an author and how you're dealing with it. It's also, you know, not just prose, now you're adding art in your collaboration with an artist. But what freedom you think that comics and dealing with the graphic novel gave you that in your fiction novel, The Madman?
Well, there are certainly correspondences between the madman and my life, which is to say the main character he's a black graduate student. I was never a graduate student. I started out as a tenured professor. I never went through the graduate student thing. I would have been much better off if I had. When I started at the University of Massachusetts, I didn't know how to requisition money for Coca-Cola for a reception, you know, for a reception. And not only that, people used it. People were very much aware that I didn't know what was going on, and they were very happy to have me become the head of the department because they knew we can get away with all sorts of things. You know, it sounds paranoid, but it's true. You know, I can say that now because I am now retired, you know, and after doing that since 1988, and I've been a full professor at 3 different colleges, at 3 different universities. And that's, you do learn something. But be that as it may. So it's, that's how those kinds of things work out. I was going to make a point, and I must admit, I've totally forgotten what it was. Oh, the madman. That's right. There are a lot of things that are simply different. I mentioned the fact that the main character and narrator of the madman is a graduate student. John Marr. And he gets involved with a homeless guy, and they live happily ever after, similar to Dennis and me. Leaky, the homeless guy that John gets involved with in The Madman, is so unlike Dennis, it's not funny. I mean, Leaky is a guy from the South, from a rather strange family. Dennis comes from Brooklyn. Leaky is still in some touch with his family. Dennis has not had any contact with his family at all since he first went on the street. When he gave up when he decided to be homeless, for him, it was a complete cut with his family, and he had reasons for it. And I've never questioned them. And he's gone back to visit his old neighborhood, but he has found out that his parents are dead, and some of the other relatives he's just not interested in looking up. So it's just a very, very different situation. It really is. And there are other things that are similar, but I'm so much more aware of the differences. That when people say, oh, well, isn't this an autobiographical? My first thought is to say, I think you're out of your mind. But the first time I felt that way, and I said it to someone who knew me very, very well, it was a party back in 1966, and someone was talking about Babel 17, a science fiction novel of mine at the time. And someone was saying, is your work autobiographical? And I thought, Babel 17 autobiographical? I just don't think, spaceships and what. At which point my host said, oh, scandalously. So, I guess it is, one person's autobiographical is another person's, scandalously different. I don't know, or vice versa. So it's hard to tell. I'm much more aware of the differences than the similarities. Okay. Are there any other questions, or are we running out of energy here? Yes, sir.
Will you be available to sign the book?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll both be out. We'll both be outside, doing our best to make the party go.
Also, just so you know, they were encouraging us to tweet it. I'm kind of new at this, so I was doing my phone. It wasn't that I haven't been completely wrapped this whole time. Just wanted to let you know they wanted us to sort of live report in a way what was going on. So I'm not over here all distracted.
Okay.
Thank you for your social media work. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We have another hand. We have another hand. Yeah.
So, I'm not sure how much time you spent specifically about this conference in comic book related spaces, but obviously you have really extensive experience. I'm very interested in people who move between those two different communities, and I'm just wondering, do they feel, have you had very different experiences talking to comics people versus talking to prose people, either your colleagues or fans or things like that?
Well, one other thing, there's a lot of interchange between, dare I say, all the paraliterary communities. And by paraliterary, I mean, that's a term that I, for a while I used fairly frequently. It is a sort of umbrella term for those genres that if you ask the ordinary man on the street, are these literature, they would say, oh no, they are comic books, they are westerns, they are crime stories, they are science fiction, they are pornography. Those are the paraliterary genres. And that's, and all the paraliterary genres have there's a lot of personal interchange. People work in one and then move to work in another. Harlan Ellison used to write men's stories for porn magazines. I've written, some of my stuff was published by, K-Sack Books, who was essentially, The Madman was initially published by K-Sack Books, which was a publisher of hardcore porn. And now it's being published by Open Road Media, which is not. Or Dahlgren, which started out as science fiction. It's now up there, it's now being published by Vintage Books, which also publishes Ulysses, I'm happy for all the company on both sides. It just would ill behoove me, to take offense at any of it. And as I said, and I welcome all kinds of writing. And I think it's all serious and and worth looking at seriously. Yeah. So, yes.
Female woman legacy. You may have already touched on this, but when they went back to some of you want to talk about Empire, they had it at the covers of the other comic books. You wrote for the Diana Prince era of Wonder Woman?
Yes.
With the white jumpsuit and all that stuff?
Yes, I did.
Wow. It's only this big when I was reading that.
Yeah. Well, I was in my late 30s, I think. Or no, that was in the 80s. So I don't even know how old I was at that point. Probably in my 30s.
How did that come about? You did do a lot of comic book writing. You did some, but how did Wonder Woman come about?
Okay, well, Wonder Woman came about because there was a period in the middle 60s when DC was experimenting with something that got the name relevant comics. That's what they were called. There was even a Sunday New York Times article in the Sunday New York Times magazine that featured something on the cover from one of these. And the main writer for that was a man named Dennis O'Neill, and the main artist was Neil Adams. And they were really very interesting stuff. And they did a Green Lantern series on drugs that was very, very serious. And it was also, it also touched very intelligently on the intersection between racial problems and drugs in a very reasonable way. And they decided they wanted to do something on feminism. Now, this was 68, 69, 70. You would think in doing something like that they would get a woman writer who had some sense of what was going on. That was a little bit beyond them. That was asking an awful lot. But I had established a reputation of being a feminist sympathizer and somebody who was concerned about these things. And so Dennis said, well, you're always making an ass out of yourself at dinner parties, saying this is the most important problem in the United States. Would you like to do something on it? He didn't put it that way, but that was that was the implication. And I said, sure, I would love to do it. And so I took it over. I took over Wonder Woman, and I did Anne has written a pretty good article on the whole situation. Essentially, I outlined a 6-story arc. That is the first of the series. I had to do one earlier one to get Wonder Woman out of the mess she was in with Fafford and the Grey Mouser, who had been co-opted into the DC universe, and then she got back to the Lower East Side where she lived, and had been living for a while. We had a 6-story arc, and in each story there was a different villain, and the villain was a different. The first villain was the mogul of a woman's department store who was trying to do all sorts of nefarious things. The next one was a head of a supermarket who was trying to subvert a woman's food cooperative. The next one was an advisor at a university who was the guy who always told the women students, you'd be happier if you got married, and stop all this stuff and go. In 1975, I just have to throw in, I taught at the University of Buffalo. And my first class was a science fiction class, and I had men and women students from engineering, from psychology, from physics, from philosophy, from English, from you name it. And my first assignment to them is go and meet with your chairman of your department and find out how many tenured women faculty there are in your department that you are going to get a major in, both the men and the women, in 1975. Do you know how many tenured women faculty there were at the University of Buffalo in 1975? One. Try again. None. Not one. It was a very lively class. When we started talking about, and these were all kids, the men and the women who were going to go on to graduate school and be professors, and the women realized there's not a snowball's chance of hell am I ever getting tenure in 1975. So, anyway, I mentioned the advisor at the university, and finally the last of the 6 stories. They were going to fight for the rights of she and the women she had gathered. Wonder Woman and the women were going to fight for an abortion clinic on the Lower East Side. That was the story arc for the 6 stories. We did the first one. We got through the first one, and there was a whole thing with there was a couple who lived in the apartment above Wonder Woman, whom you only heard their dialogue, and they had an offstage story, and they didn't come on till the last of the 6 stories, and all sorts of wonderful things like that. Gloria Steinem was being shown through the DC offices, and they showed her the new Wonder Woman. They didn't tell her what the story was. They just showed her and at that point, Wonder Woman was wearing, as you said, she was wearing a white gi. She had gotten to the point where she was not wearing the American flag falsies and the bikini, running around the street in a bikini and falsies, an American flag falsies, but she was wearing a white gi. They showed, and Steinem said, and it's perfectly understandable, she said, what happened to her, her magic powers? What happened to her, to her costume? What happened to her magic bracelets where she deflected the bullets and the magic lasso and her transparent plane? You've taken all her powers away. This was important stuff for the girls of America. And she was right. But it also, if you gave Wonder Woman back all of her powers, then you had what is known as the Superman problem, which is to say, the Superman problem is this: if you have power enough to demolish any enemy, then there's no conflict. And so Wonder Woman, for years, had been saving Earth from the blue meanies of Mars, because that's the only thing that could be strong enough, to fight, with, and use all of her magic powers. So they had taken away all her magic powers and made her into a kick-ass sort of woman, Steven Seagal. Who did karate and stuff, and she was a great karate expert. When they said if they gave her back her powers, you couldn't do my stories. There was no way that she could have, there were no stories anymore. And because Steinem had spoken, and with a great sigh of relief, the powers that be at DC, who were not terribly happy with the notion of Wonder Woman fighting for an abortion clinic anyway, and realized it was coming up, they decided, let's give Wonder Woman back her powers. Steinem says that, Gloria Steinem herself says that this is important. So they did. And so when Wonder Woman that was the end of my story subline. I was kicked off the whole thing because I said, I can't write anything that you want. I can't write relevant comics if you want them to be relevant, if we've got all this stuff. And so she went back, Wonder Woman for the next decade, went back to saving the Earth from the blue meanies of Mars, and so they never got to fight. They never got to work with to fight for the rights of an abortion clinic, or a women's food cooperative, or, straighten out the problems of a whole lot of women in a college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Huh? Yeah, so that's the way that is the story. And why that's what happened, and why we never got past more than the first issue, which is still known as the women's lib issue. Like I said, it's like Howie and Empire. You just can't win. So that's the story.